This is the moment Iran crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. At exactly 11:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday, March 9th, 2026, the newly installed Supreme Leader of Iran, Moshtaba, delivered a 12-minute address that was broadcast simultaneously across every Iranian state media outlet, every proxy network from Beirut to Baghdad, and transmitted directly to the United States State Department through a Swiss diplomatic back channel. If you look at the emergency session happening right now inside the White House Situation Room, you will see Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and a rotating cast of military commanders who have been locked inside that room for the past 6 hours. The silence from the building is deafening. No press briefing, no statement, no tweet from the president, nothing, as of 6:00 a.m. Tuesday morning, March 10th, 2026, the United States government has issued zero public response to what Iran just announced. The president, already dealing with a collapsing stock market, mounting pressure from European allies to end the war, and 7 American soldiers dead in 10 days, has just been handed an ultimatum that makes every previous crisis look manageable. In this deep dive, we are going to show you the exact text of what Cam said, reveal the 3 specific demands he made that have never been made public, explain why China issued a statement within 90 minutes supporting Iran's position, and break down the internal Pentagon documents that leaked this morning, showing military leaders believe this war is unwinnable without a ground invasion that Congress will never authorize. Iran is not just resisting American pressure. They are dictating terms to the United States for the first time in modern history. Before we go deeper, hit the subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. What happens in the next 72 hours will determine whether this becomes the greatest foreign policy humiliation in American history or whether the administration finds an exit strategy that does not look like surrender. You need to be here when the White House finally responds. Subscribe now. Let me give you the setup of how we got to this exact moment. 11 days ago, the United States and Israel launched what they called Operation Epic Fury. The plan was to destroy Iran's nuclear program, decapitate its leadership, and force regime change within a week. President Trump announced the operation himself. He promised the American people that Iran would be brought to its knees, that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei would be eliminated, and that a new government friendly to Western interests would emerge. It was supposed to be swift, decisive, and final. The cost was not supposed to be measured in American lives or in economic chaos. It was supposed to be a surgical operation that demonstrated American military dominance and ended Iran's nuclear ambitions forever. But the gamble was built on a false assumption. The administration assumed that killing Ali Khamenei would create a power vacuum. They assumed competing factions would fight for control. They assumed the Iranian people would welcome regime change. They assumed wrong. Within hours of Ali Khamenei's death, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had already made their decision. They installed his son Moshtaba as the new supreme leader before the dust had settled in Thrawn. There was no power struggle. There was no vacuum. There was only a smooth military-backed transition to a leader who is younger, more radical, and more willing to escalate than his father ever was. The plan that was supposed to end in victory has instead produced a crisis that is spiraling in directions the White House never prepared for. At 11:47 p.m. last night, everything changed again. Moshtaba Kameh addressed the Iranian people for 12 minutes, but he was not speaking to the Iranian people. Every word was aimed directly at Washington. For the first 6 minutes, he recited a list of what he called American crimes, the assassination of his father, the killing of Iranian scientists, the decades of sanctions, the support for Israel, the occupation of Arab lands by American forces. It was standard rhetoric. Then at the 7-minute mark, his tone shifted. He stopped talking about the past and started talking about the future. He laid out 3 demands. The full text of these demands was transmitted to the State Department through Switzerland. Most major networks reported that Iran called for American withdrawal from the Middle East. That is accurate but incomplete. What they did not report is the specific language Kameh used and the exact timeline he gave. Demand 1, all. American military forces must begin withdrawal from Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia within 30 days. Not eventually, not after negotiations, within 30 days. Demand 2. The United States must lift every sanction imposed on Iran since 1979, including all banking restrictions, all oil export limitations, and all technology transfer bans within 60 days. Demand 3, the United States must pay reparations to Iran for what KA called the economic war that has cost Iran over $800 billion in lost revenue over the past 4 decades. He set the figure at $500 billion to be paid over 10 years. Then came the part that has the Pentagon in crisis mode. Cam said, if these demands are not met, Iran will take 3 specific actions. Action 1, Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz to all commercial shipping effective immediately upon the expiration of the 30-day deadline. Action 2, Iran will activate what he called defensive military partnerships with Russia and China, including the possibility of foreign military bases on Iranian soil. Action 3, Iran will exercise its right under international law to develop and deploy a full-spectrum nuclear deterrent capability. He did not say Iran would pursue a nuclear weapon. He said Iran would deploy one. That language matters. It suggests they already have it. While Kham was delivering this address, something else was happening. Chinese state media released a statement at exactly 1:15 a.m. Eastern Time, 90 minutes after Khamenei finished speaking. The statement said, China recognizes Iran's legitimate security concerns and supports Iran's right to defend itself against foreign aggression. It called for immediate negotiations based on respect for Iranian sovereignty. Russia issued a similar statement 40 minutes later. Both countries used language that essentially endorsed Iran's position. At the same time, oil futures markets opened in Asia. Within 3 hours, crude oil jumped another 18%. Brent crude is now at $121 per barrel. The S&P 500 futures dropped 4% before trading was halted. Gold spiked to its highest price in history. Bitcoin collapsed by 22% as investors fled to traditional safe havens. The global economy is pricing in the possibility that Iran actually follows through. And here is what makes this worse. At 4:30 a.m. Eastern Time, someone inside the Pentagon leaked a classified assessment to the Washington Post. The document is marked top secret and dated March 9th, 1 day before Khamenei's speech. The assessment concludes that the current military campaign has achieved tactical success in destroying Iranian infrastructure, but has failed to achieve any strategic objective. It states that Iran retains the ability to strike American forces indefinitely, that Iranian missile production has not been significantly degraded, and that Iran's nuclear facilities in deep underground bunkers remain intact despite repeated strikes. The assessment goes further. It says that achieving total military victory would require a ground invasion force of at least 200,000 troops, sustained over 18 months at a cost of $3 trillion and an estimated 15,000 American casualties. The conclusion of the document is devastating. It recommends that the administration seek a negotiated settlement within the next 2 weeks before Iran's position strengthens further. Pause. That document was written before Cam made his demands public. The Pentagon already knew this war was unwinnable. Now, Iran has put terms on the table that make any American victory claim impossible. According to leaks from sources inside the National Security Council, an emergency meeting took place at 1 a.m. this morning. The participants included the President, the Vice President, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General C.Q. Brown. The topic was simple. How do we respond to Iran without looking like we are surrendering and without starting a war we cannot win? We have learned from multiple sources familiar with the discussion that the meeting became heated. Secretary Rubio argued for immediate rejection of Iran's demands and a massive escalation of airstrikes to force Iran back to the table. Secretary Hegseth reportedly pushed back hard. He pointed to the leaked Pentagon assessment and said the military does not have the resources to sustain a prolonged campaign while maintaining commitments in Europe and Asia. National Security Advisor Waltz raised the China problem. If the United States rejects negotiations and China openly backs Iran, with weapons or financial support, the entire strategic balance in the Middle East shifts permanently. General Brown made the situation worse. He told the room that if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, the United States has 2 options: accept it or go to war to reopen it. Going to war to reopen it means striking Iranian coastal defenses, which means hitting Russian-made S-400 missile systems, which means the possibility of Russian casualties, which means the risk of direct confrontation with a nuclear power. The president asked one question: can we win this without putting American boots on the ground in Iran? General Brown's answer, according to 3 people in the room, was no. Not if Iran has external support from China and Russia. Not if they are willing to accept economic collapse in exchange for resistance. Not if their nuclear program is further along than intelligence assessments predicted. The decision was made to delay any public response for at least 48 hours while back-channel negotiations through Switzerland explore whether Iran's demands are an opening position or a final ultimatum. But here is the problem with that strategy. Every hour, the United States stays silent. It looks weaker. Why did Iran do this? Follow the power. Mojtaba Khamenei is not his father. Ali Khamenei spent decades balancing different factions inside Iran. He negotiated. He compromised. He played a long game. Mojtaba does not have that luxury. He was installed by the military. The IRGC put him in power. They expect him to deliver results. Sources inside Iranian opposition groups say Mojtaba and the IRGC leadership had a meeting within hours of his appointment. The message was clear. We made you supreme leader. You will give us what we want. What they want is the complete removal of American influence from the region, the economic resources, to rebuild Iran's military and the international legitimacy that comes from forcing the United States to negotiate as an equal. This shifts power from Washington to Tehran in a way that has not happened since 1979. For 4 decades, the United States has dictated terms to Iran: sanctions, pressure, isolation, military threats. Iran had no leverage. Now they have leverage. 7 American soldiers dead, oil at $121. A leaked Pentagon document saying the war is unwinnable. China and Russia openly backing Iran's position. The Strait of Hormuz as a loaded gun pointed at the global economy. Mojtaba Khamenei is not begging for negotiations. He is demanding surrender. What historians will call this moment depends entirely on what happens next. 72 hours. If the United States accepts negotiations on Iran's terms, it will be remembered as the end of American dominance in the Middle East. If the United States rejects negotiations and the war continues, it will be remembered as the beginning of an unwinnable conflict that drained American resources and credibility for years. This is not a minor foreign policy challenge. This is a fundamental restructuring of global power. This is 1979 meeting 2026. When a regional power backed by global superpowers can make demands of the United States, and the United States has no good options to respond, that signals the end of an era. The legal ramifications are significant. International law experts at Georgetown and Harvard have already published preliminary analyses. They point out that Iran's demand for reparations has precedent in international arbitration. The demand for sanctions relief is consistent with positions taken by the United Nations Security Council in previous negotiations. The demand for American troop withdrawal is framed as restoration of sovereignty, which has support in international law. If this goes to the International Court of Justice or the UN Security Council, Iran has a case that will receive support from a majority of non-aligned nations. This is not just a military crisis. It is a legal and diplomatic crisis where Iran has prepared the ground carefully. Here is the domino effect we are looking at. If the United States agrees to negotiate, regional allies lose faith in American security guarantees. Saudi Arabia starts making deals with Iran. Israel feels abandoned and takes independent military action. American credibility collapses across the Middle East. But if the United States refuses to negotiate, oil prices continue rising. The global economy slides into recession. European allies who depend on Middle Eastern energy supplies pressure Washington to accept a ceasefire. Congress refuses to authorize a ground war. The administration is trapped between humiliation and catastrophe. China is watching this very closely. Beijing sees an opportunity to position itself as the broker of Middle East peace. If China can negotiate a settlement that the United States cannot, it demonstrates to the entire world that American power is no longer decisive. Russia is calculating its own advantages. Every American asset committed to the Middle East is an asset not available for Europe or Asia. A prolonged conflict in Iran serves Russian interests perfectly. A desperate United States can be pressured into concessions on Ukraine or NATO expansion. Where are America's traditional allies? Britain issued a carefully worded statement calling for de-escalation and dialogue. France said the situation requires immediate diplomatic engagement. Germany warned of catastrophic economic consequences if the conflict continues. None of them backed the American position unconditionally. Why? Because they see the same intelligence assessments. They know this war has no military solution. They are protecting their own interests. They are distancing themselves from an American policy that looks increasingly reckless. A divided Western alliance cannot pressure Iran effectively. Reports from sources close to the administration describe a president who is isolated and angry. He is reportedly obsessing over the leaked Pentagon document, demanding to know who is responsible. He keeps asking his advisors why Iran is still fighting if we destroyed their infrastructure. He is experiencing what defense analysts call the reality gap, the gap between what he was promised this operation would achieve and what it has actually achieved. Staff are limiting his media exposure. They are controlling who gets access to him. They are trying to prevent him from making statements that box the administration into positions it cannot sustain. The oil price spike is not just a number on a screen. It is real pain hitting American consumers and businesses. Gas prices are up 60 cents per gallon in 10 days. Airlines are announcing fare increases and route cancellations. Shipping costs are surging. Inflation that was finally coming under control is spiking again. The Federal Reserve is in an impossible position. Raise rates to fight inflation and crash the economy, or hold rates steady and watch prices explode. The economic damage from this war is now measurable in every American's wallet. Political pressure is building fast. So where are we right now? Moshtaba Kham has delivered an ultimatum to the United States: withdraw, lift sanctions, and pay reparations or face closure of the Strait of Hormuz, Chinese and Russian military support for Iran, and an Iranian nuclear weapon. The Pentagon has concluded the war is unwinnable without a massive ground invasion. The president has gone silent. Oil is at $121. The global economy is pricing in disaster. China and Russia are backing Iran. European allies are hedging, and the clock is ticking on a 30-day deadline that the administration has no strategy to address. He wanted to project strength. He ended up revealing weakness. You cannot spin the Pentagon's own classified assessment. You cannot spin oil prices. You cannot spin the fact that Iran is making demands and the United States has no response. Reality has a way of asserting itself. The reality is that killing one leader did not end the Iranian government. It created a more radical successor. The reality is that airstrikes did not break Iran's will. They hardened it. The reality is that American military power, as vast as it is, cannot solve every problem. Some conflicts have no military solution. As we head into the next 48 hours, expect desperate attempts to find a face-saving exit. The administration will try to claim that any negotiations were always part of the plan. They will try to redefine victory. They will try to spin withdrawal as strategic repositioning. But here is what cannot be undone. Iran forced the United States to the negotiating table by surviving the initial assault and then making demands backed by credible threats. When a regional power can do that to a global superpower, the balance has shifted. When that shift happens publicly, with the whole world watching, there is no going back to the old arrangement. Subscribe. We will be monitoring the Swiss back-channel communications that are happening right now between American and Iranian diplomats. If the administration makes any statement in the next 48 hours, we will break down exactly what the language reveals about their strategy. When the 30-day deadline starts approaching, we will track every move Iran makes toward the Strait of Hormuz. This is history happening in real time. The decisions made in the next 72 hours will define American foreign policy for the next decade. Stay with this channel, turn on notifications. When the White House breaks its silence, when Iran makes its next move, when the economic pressure becomes unbearable, I will be here covering every document, every statement, every development as it happens. This is the moment American power met a challenge it cannot overcome with force alone. Watch closely.